in plans. Debbie Bucci, who's the blockchain evangelist, is her unofficial title at HHS. She was on a plane, and I'm guessing you were a little bit delayed. So instead of having her on the panel, I want to do a one-on-one and talk about blockchain.
Okay.
So let me see. So you are a blockchain evangelist at HHS. Talk a little bit about exactly what you do there in your role.
So I am an IT architect in the Office of the National Coordinator. I'm a techie in a policy shop, essentially. But my focus is really on privacy and security, and because I was like 15, 20 years at NIH, I look towards emerging technology. And with a focus, I did a lot of SOA infrastructure, federated authentication. So I have a real sense of that's my interest for that.
And blockchain is all the rage now. What has led up to this momentum that we see?
So I've been following it for at least 3 or 4 years. I first heard about it at MIT when some of the Bitcoin folks had gone to talk about the underlying technology around blockchain. And what caught my interest early was the crypto folks were really leaning in heavily around the distributed nature of information and data. And there's a lot of hype around the promise. But what it seems, what we've been told is auditing, non-repudiation, ways to share legal documentation digitally and things like that. So there's a move to a parallel move to the Bitcoin monetary around that type of information.
What do you see as, what is the federal government's adoption of blockchain? It's relatively new to the federal sector. Where do you see, have you seen it come across any interesting use cases?
I don't believe, blockchain is not ready for full-fledged adoption, but there are places, GSA, DHS, that are taking really hard looks at it. There have been some SBIR grants that are specifically looking at blockchain around identity management, and we have done a couple of exploratory challenges around just to get a sense of how it could potentially be used.
I know you've planned hackathons around the topic, and what were some of the key takeaways from that?
Blockchain is a class of distributed ledger technologies. There's not just one. Coming from the Office of the National Coordinator, interoperability is huge. So there is a lot of focus around how to get these different chains to interop. Not only that, what are the services that it relies on at the hackathon itself. Half of them used a distributed web. IPFS is kind of a distributed World Wide Web type of application. And that was down, and because of that, half of them couldn't even do their demonstrations. So I think the takeaway there is it's not just the distributed technology, but what are the other standards and protocols that are going to be needed to support this type of infrastructure.
What are some of the misconceptions you've heard about blockchain? What are some common ones that you encounter?
Blockchain will rip and replace everything that's there. There is a school of thought. You should never, ever, ever, ever put PI information on the blockchain, because even though it's encrypted, keys expire. Private keys get stolen. So, but it is a way to have pointers to data, as they're saying, off-chain.
What do you think that agencies who are looking to kind of dip their toes into blockchain and start exploring the technologies, what are some of the strategic things that they should do first?
So my sense is that they are focusing on the low-hanging fruit of what are the challenges that they are having now instead of replacing what is there. So for an example, there was a demonstration done out of Boston around health records, around the auditing and the metadata, the extra information about blockchain, about the medical records, and they found that that actually streamlined their processes. The interesting thing is they weren't necessarily tied to a specific blockchain, but the idea that they had this public ledger of being able to track the information. So there are supply chains, ways of about ledger auditing that I do believe that I see that some of the agencies are possibly taking a look at.
Mm-hmm. And we're very early in the kind of nascent stages of
very
adoption.
early, very early.
What's your vision of blockchain? Like, where would you see it, or where do you see it used in the next few years or so, 3 to 5 years?
So it just came from the West Coast from an identity workshop, and my focus is, I don't know if you've heard of the term of sovereign identity. What is sovereign identity? And then for those of the whole idea of having aggregated claims about, to be able to do a claim that you're over 21 or something like that. So I think it's too early for a strategy to see where it's going, but it seems there are emerging standards around uniquely identifying the chains, how to uniquely identify verified claims and things like that. I think has the potential of moving the whole blockchain effort forward to give it some interoperability framework to hang from, so to speak.
And what are you most excited about blockchain that you're working on? What's next for you?
Not working on anything directly, though. We just had a challenge that we issued a few months ago around auditing. We did not indicate blockchain about it at all. But the interesting thing is the top 3 out of the 4 finalists were blockchain potential solutions. No matter how we diced it or sliced it, it was at least half of them were with blockchain. So it'd be interesting using Hyperledger, Fabric, one of them using Ethereum. So I'm really kind of excited to see what potential solutions they're coming up for the challenge, just to see how things have moved forward.
I have some more questions, but I want to make sure that I take a couple of questions from the audience as well. Do we have questions?
No questions, good.
No? Steve?
I do have a question. I mean, it must be challenging to... Thank you, Mike. It must be challenging to work on a technology in government that is so cutting edge that probably a lot of people don't understand it, can probably, can't get their arms around how they can apply it. How do you deal with that? How do you try to explain a technology and its potential when so few people, even in society, forget government, just don't really even understand it?
So about a year and a half ago, I went to ONC and I said, there's something going on with blockchain and we really need to look at it. And, the mission, that certainly doesn't align with what the mission is, but because of the hype, we realized that it was something that we could not ignore. So at that time, I did a query on Google to see healthcare and blockchain, and I could only find 3 references. One was Estonia, MIT that I was familiar with, and then there was Philips Healthcare. So we did a challenge for white papers to align it with NIST. We also talked to NIST, and NIST was the same. It's like, we don't know whether we should do anything yet. Should we watch it? So we figured that it would be a good way to start would be to have a workshop to what is blockchain, how is it used, and use the papers to kind of drive the agenda. We expected 15 papers, we got 77. And what happened is so what's happening is, so we use that as a level setting a year ago. If you go to healthit.gov/blockchain, many of the papers that are there, the ones that aren't there, were actually gone to publication elsewhere. The workshop is there. So we did a base level of understanding of what blockchain was then. But that understanding then from now is it's still evolving. So as agencies, I believe we need to lean in, to watch how it progresses. But as far as I am aware of, I do not know of anything outside of pilot or demonstrations. There was an example, a really interesting one, the state of Illinois that is using blockchain for the issuing of credentials, licensing, and possibly for cross-state. But because of the limitations, and nobody's going to put information on the blockchain yet, they're having to do manual like forms, or have the physicians actually certify that these are their registration shortcuts. So it's way, way too early, but there's attempts.
Do you have peers in other federal agencies do other federal agencies have a blockchain advocate like you?
Yes, there are other advocates.
There's a group of you guys.
Yeah, well, we had a GSA that was here. Certainly there's been a tremendous lot of work done in DHS around the identity, and they are very adamant about not putting any PII on the blockchain. And so I was like, isn't it time to get some white papers out there that to really, from the lessons learned, but also to talk to the community that's actually working in the identity space, and how they're working with Hyperledger, the Indie project, to see how that is really shaping up, and how their thought process has gone over I just came from there, so that's why I'm kind of excited about that, to see that progress. It's maybe not ready to reveal to agencies, but there is a framework that I sense there's a framework that's becoming that we'll be realizing within the next, I don't know, 6, 8 months, I don't know, but it's there.
Is there better awareness or more awareness among private sector folks when it comes to blockchain?
I think because of financial and Bitcoin and all that, there is an awareness of the underlying technology of that. I think that's possibly driving a lot of the hype and the popularity around it, possibly.
Mm-hmm. Questions back there?
Uh-oh.
Certainly part of the success of electronic health record is due to ONC's efforts to create a framework around certification and standards. Do you envision that ONC could play a role in the security aspects of that? It could be argued, whether it's blockchain or some other solution.
Oh, I don't want to speculate about that.
Oh. But it would certainly be helpful to those of us concerned about the ability to take 1 or 2 data fields at a time from 25 sites to put your electronic health profile together.
So isn't there a school of thought of if blockchain is a technology, is an underlying technology like database technology? I don't know that we certified databases. It could be that it's a standard or protocol that may mature on their own, that maybe it's too early to tell if it even needs any type of certification. That's why I say I wouldn't want to speculate it, because it seems that blockchain is an underlying technology that I don't think the average Joe, the average citizen, will know they're using blockchain, but the idea that they quickly have access to their information, I do know that I've seen some examples when people start talking about blockchain, they hold up their phone and here's all the information that's there. It'll be so, what is it, the word I'm looking for, ubiquitous, that you would possibly, it doesn't make sense, I don't think.
Like cloud. I mean, nobody, we all use cloud, but what do we talk about it? Not really.
Say it again?
Cloud is the same. It's not visible. I mean, we just
It's not
use
visible.
it. Yeah.
The closest is FedRAMP, right? There's certification, that kind of thing, but.
Right. I think we have one more question. Frankie over there? Yes. Oh, Toby
Yes,
Jones.
sorry, just to follow up on the discussion. In talking about FedRAMP and its application to data, the security aspects of it indeed do drive a lot of stuff and a lot of standardization, a lot of requirements imposed on your databases, your access to it, how do you prevent people from hacking into it and all of that sort of stuff. And so I think one of the questions is it conceivable that blockchain is going to become somehow standard and interchangeable, or is it driving towards proprietary solutions, like many of the other things are, like databases used to be, that force us as a government to enter in some large and long-term and rather painful relationships with vendors? So do you have an idea of where the technology kind of leans to on that sort of a spectrum between openness and standardization or proprietary solutions?
Is there a question there, Tony?
Yeah,
Can you
was
summarize
stated,
it?
or, well, I was,
In which direction do you think blockchain is going?
so, my sense is both, that there will be distributed ledger technology. There are many, many flavors, and for the openness of the market, a lot of the work is how do you translate, as a matter, I saw one app, how do you translate one blockchain from another to get some generic, perhaps there's standardization around semantics. I mean, that happens with all different technologies, right? Semantic standardizations. When you began to talk, I was thinking about the security of pairwise relationships with keys. There's still going to be a key management issue that you're going to have to manage how to lost keys, expired keys, and things like that. That is going to be a tremendous, that needs to be focused, and I would think needs to be standardized around that type of work. But I'm not. Hopefully it's more open, but you would think there would be some proprietary ways of doing the distributed ledger, if that's going to happen, I would think.
Well, thank you so much, Debbie. I would love to.